You know those moments in your intimate relationships, whether that be with your partner, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a coworker, to where you continue to bump into the same problem, have the same fight, say the same things, feel the same way inside your body, think the same thoughts in your mind, and it just happens over and over and over again. What is that? I know I've experienced this in my own life, and I've spoken a lot about my previous relationship, and I'm going to bring that forth again today, just in this aspect of when I would get triggered, my mind would absolutely shut down. My brain would shut down. I just have so many memories of me staring at the wall in front of me, just being kind of numb in those moments and just feeling really stuck and trapped. And we all have our own different expressions of how the pattern plays out, right? Maybe you are more extroverted with your sensation and your feelings and your words and your expression. Or maybe you tend to withdraw like me, but in a different way. Like you seek alone time and you just go and withdraw into a room, or maybe you're a caves environment and you go and withdraw into your cave, or maybe you go move your body and you just have to get this energy out and you're just so pissed at the other person, or maybe you chase them down and force them to talk about it in that moment because you cannot let this go any further without trying to come to a resolution, which maybe you will, maybe you won't, but that is your process in this. Whatever that pattern is, what it's related to with the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, the beliefs, it's all happening for a reason. And we're talking about that today as we are going to be diving into the pathway of karma and the sphere of your IQ in the Gene Keys Golden Path. And these two aspects specifically relate to the mental patterns that were established between ages 14 to 21. And so right off the bat, I want to invite you to start to contemplate that season of your life and really start to consider the type of thoughts, emotions, sensations, environments, feelings, relationships that formed you during that time and are still continuing to show up today in your adult life. This is going to be a really fun conversation. I'm super excited to dive into this information with you. So let's get right into it. Before we hop into this conversation today, I just want to say a couple of things. And the first one is thank you for still showing up and being here and allowing me to be in this messy middle. I'm sure you can tell that I do not have a podcast intro or outro to this anymore. I am very much just continuing to go with the flow here as I am in a podcasting program that is essentially shaking everything up, which is fine and beautiful, but that's the reason I haven't quite landed on another intro yet with this rebrand, because my messaging is shifting, even though I'm still going to be talking about human design and gene keys and relationships and business and self-leadership and all of the same stuff, but I'm in this messy middle. So I just want to say thank you again for supporting the show and being here and continuing to dive into this life-changing information. I'm super, super excited to kick off this conversation again with diving into the golden path and continuing to tread it, going through the spheres. And so I hope you're excited for this episode again. And we've taken a little bit of time off, but we're back, baby. So let's go. The next thing I want to say is if you are loving this conversation and this aspect of going through each individual sphere and pathway of the Gene Keys Golden Path and also synthesizing the human design system into these conversations by looking at what center your IQ sphere or your attraction sphere or your purpose sphere and so on and so forth might be activated in the human design system and all of the other aspects of human design that tend to be brought in, I want to invite you into a couple of different things just really quickly. The first thing is currently right now I am doing a 4-week class called Human Design Happy Hour. This is where we're going over type and strategy, the centers, authorities, and then finally the profile lines. And so I know that we've talked about these things before in previous episodes, but if you want to be a part of this experience and have further context and information to dive into and to be a part of a community, then I want to invite you into that space. It's currently being ran live. We are in week 3 going over authorities, but I am recording all of these sessions and they are available to you to catch the replays. And I've also dropped some additional resources in the portal for you to dive into. And if you're not into joining that right now, just know that this will be a passive offer that I'm going to have moving forward that you can tune into anytime. And the second thing that I want to inform you about is after this Human Design Happy Hour class ends in June of 2025, starting in July, we are going to be kicking off the Gene Keys Book Club. This is something that I downloaded around Christmas time of 2024. I've been sitting with it for a while and I finally decided that I'm going to kick it off and just do it. And so we are going to be going over the entire Gene Keys Golden Path, similar to what we are now, but we're going to be doing it together, and we're going to be going over one sphere per month so that you have enough time to really digest and integrate and read the book or listen to the audio transmissions and to come into a community in which you can share your interpretations and your experiences with your particular Gene Keys. We're going to be going over the shadow in week 1 of the month, the gift in week 2, the city in week 3, and then the line expression in the 4th week of the month. And that is the setup for month after month after month. And so if this sounds like something that you would be interested in, either Human Design Happy Hour or Gene Keys Book Club, please come into my DMs and drop me the acronym HDHH for Human Design Happy Hour, obviously, or GKBC for Gene Keys Book Club. My Instagram will be linked in the show notes, and so click that link and come chat with me in the DMs, and I would love to have you in the space. And so thank you for that, and let's go ahead and start talking about the pathway of karma. And so you've probably all have heard of karma, right? It's very much this conversation of cause and effect. You get what you put out. I'm sure you've heard that karma's a bitch. And, sure, there's definitely truth to that. The universe is very reciprocal in nature, but through the lens of the Gene Keys Venus sequence, in regard to the pathway of karma, it actually takes a different context that I'm excited to share with you today. And so, like I was talking about in the intro, we all have these specific patterns that tend to show up in our relationships in various ways and stages. And there's a lot that goes into this for sure. But the biggest aspect with the pathway of karma is that relationships are our mirrors. I know you've heard me say that before. And whenever we take a closer look at these patterns that tend to show up, we can start to see the deeper energetic and spiritual meaning that they're actually informing our lives and our awareness of, versus just your mom being, totally unavailable, or your husband being stuck in his old ways or unavailable, or your friend just kind of only thinking about herself or himself, or maybe they're distant and they pull away, or maybe you feel like the relationship isn't very reciprocal and you show up for them but they don't show up for you, or maybe someone in your life like gaslights you and turns things around on you and you're like, what is happening? Like, this isn't true, this isn't real, or what is this pattern trying to show me, essentially, is the bigger question here. And I want to invite you into, as best you can, to separate yourself from this pattern just a bit. And I know that there's deep emotions wrapped into this, and we are going to get into that. But the more that you can observe this pattern and do your best to not feel like a victim. And I don't mean this to point fingers or anything, but whenever we get triggered, we tend to drop into a lower frequency of blame, shame, resentment, fear, just anger, rage, right? It's a lower frequency vibration of being in this victim pattern of thinking it's always going to be this way. He's never going to change. She's always going to be like that. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. And so recognizing that pattern running in the first place and doing your best to step back, take an empowered perspective, and take a look from a different angle, this is where you can start to see that this karma in your relationship is happening for a reason. It's not necessarily to get back at you because you've done something wrong. It's literally here to help to increase your awareness and help you mature. And when it comes down to it, ultimately, this pattern is leading us more towards our own self-love. Because what happens whenever we are in these relationships and we feel like it's always going to be this way, it's never going to change. I don't know why they're like this. I don't know why they treat me like this. I don't know why this is happening to me. We get cut off from love, right? We start to close our heart off. We start to shut down. And the purpose of the Venus sequence is to live with our heart wide open. And as we talked about in a previous episode, whenever we dove into the attraction sphere, is that our energy attracts in certain relationships for a reason. And yes, a lot of the relationships that are in our lives via our parents or siblings, we can't control. We were born into that. However, the lesson still applies that karma is a mirror for your own self-love. And if you can imagine how differently it could play out if you can tap into that state of unconditional self-love, then that will also allow you to, one, view this situation from an empowered perspective, see it from an elevated perspective as well, like more of an observer view, and take a step back from it, and also allow you to extend love and understanding and empathy and compassion to the other. So while that point that I just made is all well and good of how it can support you in extending that love to the other, I want to reiterate that this is for you. This is only about your own soul's purpose, soul journey, soul awareness, soul illumination. And so it starts with you. And so I say this because you cannot control how the other person responds or reacts to your own self process of alchemizing this crappy situation into something of higher love and purity and gold. And so a lot of the time when it comes to these relationships is we wish that the other person would come around. We wish that they would just see things from your perspective. We wish that they would just change. We wish that they would just do the work on themselves as well. But that's out of our control. We can't do that. And so with this work, like I've mentioned before, by you doing this work on yourself, it can support the other person in also raising their frequency, increasing their self-awareness, changing their habits and patterns and challenges, and taking responsibility for themselves. But it's not guaranteed. And so I really just want you to know that you do not have to include your partner into every aspect of this, because this is your inner process. And it can also just be repelling to them if this is not their process, if this is not how they're choosing to move forward in life on a spiritual and emotional level. And as much as that sucks, it's sometimes reality. I think we've all have experienced this aspect of doing work on ourselves, right? And wanting to invite the other in, or inviting them to join us and to share the things that we are learning or the insights and ahas that we have had, only for it to fall on deaf ears and not be received or reciprocated or picked up at all, if you know what I mean. And so I want you to hold this process lightly in yourself and give the other person, just let them off the hook. And if they're going to pick it up, they're going to pick it up. And if not, then that's their own process. They are also walking their own pathway of karma. They are also living their own dharma. They are also dancing with these energetic and spiritual and emotional frequencies that are informing their life and relationships and experience and awareness. And as much as you want to help and support them and have them come along with you, that is ultimately up to them. And so, beating a dead horse here, I'm going to move on. But in order to let go of that blame and shame and resentment and projection of anger, the more that you can realize that this is only your path and your responsibility, the easier it will be to hold this process lightly, let the other person off the hook, and let you to continue to move forward to essentially change the karma, the pattern, the purpose, the lesson in this relationship that you are meant to learn, my love. The good news is, however, is that, as you know, the Venus sequence and treading your golden path, it gradually changes you from the inside out. And so as you continue to do this work and detach from your partner's receptivity or behavior, and you start to have a stronger integrity within yourself and energetic boundaries and appreciation and observational perspective of this whole process, you will improve your recovery time of experiencing those triggers in your relationship, and you'll be able to see the pattern when it's playing out and catch yourself in that, let it go, apologize to yourself or to the other if necessary, and move on. Essentially, you're being mature. You are taking responsibility for this pattern playing out. You're catching it more more quickly. You're shifting it, you're pivoting into the higher frequencies, you're dancing with it a little bit more elegantly and gracefully. And that's the beauty of working with the Venus sequence, is that it teaches you how to alchemize change in your life from the inside out. And it doesn't create generally this massive upheaval all at once in your life. It starts with little shifts here and there in regard to those energetic boundaries and appreciation and different perspectives, like I was speaking into, and that you will see it happening and unfolding in your daily life that will have a truly lasting quality on yourself and your relationships, which is so choice. One more thing that I want to mention before we start to dive into the IQ sphere is that with this pathway of karma, relationships can improve, and there can also be this aspect of closure. And for a lot of people in relationships that feel heavy and hard, and, due to our own lack of awareness or our partners, relationships can tend to end before they've served their true purpose. And I'm saying this because if you have experienced moving from one relationship to the next and the pattern keeps repeating, you keep dating the same guys, you keep dating the same girls, you keep having the same fights, but with somebody else or in a different way, and it's just like the same theme, then that means the lesson hasn't been learned. The karma hasn't been burned off yet. You haven't fully alchemized that crap into gold, and the transformation that your karma is trying to walk you through hasn't yet set in. And so with this, I want to invite you to actually stay in your relationships. This is so nuanced, okay? Don't hate me for saying this, but if you recognize the pattern that's coming up and you're still able to continue to work on it in this relationship, I really want to invite you to go even deeper into the lesson, into the problem, into your awareness, into the challenges that are coming up, into the things that you actually want to say, into the person that you actually want to be, into the energetic boundaries that you want to uphold, into the standards that you want to live into, and the values of the decisions that you make and how they inform those, and all of that. I think there is still more work to do for most of us, myself included, in this aspect. And in addition to that, if you feel like you have done absolutely everything that you can, there is this aspect of karmic closure that it's okay for you to leave a relationship if it's not going anywhere. If you have been doing the work, and you specifically, my friend, have been diving into your human design gene keys, and they have illuminated so much inside of you and outside of you, if they have liberated you from these patterns, if they have validated your experiences, if they have brought you clarity and certainty and boundaries and standards and all of those things that I have spoke into just a moment ago, and potentially the other person is still not on board, they're not seeing it, they don't appreciate you, they're not receptive, and you feel like you are actually coming to an end of a karmic closure with you being a different person and totally shifting your own self-perception and rekindling that unconditional love from yourself, even if it's not perfect, even if you falter, even if you have lower frequency moments or days, it's totally fine. But there is this aspect of staying in a relationship until it has reached that karmic closure itself and it feels like a natural ending. That's your go sign. But if you feel like you're jumping ship and you haven't learned your lesson yet, and there's this bitterness and resentment that is just fueling you, and you were just like making an emotional decision potentially, that's the difference in the energy of your decisions. And so just notice, is this rooted in the decision that you're making? Is it rooted in fear and lack? Or is it rooted in love and abundance? And speaking into this for me in my previous relationship is I had ultimately broken my heart so deeply from cutting myself off due to blame and resentment and projection and just low frequencies of also lack, that all that was left was unconditional love for myself, for my parents who I had blamed for a long time, for my partner who I had absolutely blamed and just, struggled with for a long time, that at the end of that relationship, it was ultimately a karmic closure. And I can speak into that because the energetic frequency and clarity that I felt in that decision was absolutely 100% clear. Was I completely healed? No. Was he? Absolutely not. Were we as a couple? No. But there was still a leaving that relationship with a lot of mutual respect and understanding and support that happened, that informed this karmic closure and has allowed me to engage in this new relationship with my current boyfriend, who we've been together for almost 3.5 years now, to where we don't have issues like really at all, which is beautiful. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying we don't, because we've both have done immense amount of work on ourselves, that we come to our relationship very clear, very open-hearted, very open-minded, very open in our communication. And so it is possible for you too. And so just really tune in into the energy in which you want to make your decisions and how much work, honestly and objectively, that you have done in this relationship to support the continued work and going deeper, or in the closure, so you can move on and continue to return non-love with love, which is the whole point of the Venus sequence. All right, so getting into the sphere of your IQ, this is from ages about 15 or 14 up to 21, and this is talking about the childhood woundings or the mental patterns that specifically were imprinted on you during this phase. This is where we tend to form our primary mental views on life, like our opinions, our beliefs, and our basic psychology and how we move about and view the world. And as we've talked about before, going back in time through the Venus sequence, when starting with our IQ and this being our mental body from ages about 14 to 15 to 21, we then go further back in time into our emotional quotient, our emotional body from ages about 8 to 15 or 7 to 14. And then we go further back into our spiritual quotient, our SQ sphere, which is from ages 0 to 7 or 8. And then we go into that core wound, which was inherited in utero. And so I just wanted to touch on that aspect of everything builds upon itself, and we are imprinted with these gene keys specifically for a reason, to alchemize and make sense of our mind, our emotions, our spirit, and our deep ancestral aspects of ourselves that are informing our relationships, our life, our work, and so much more. So as we consider our IQ, this is the measure of our mental intelligence, our ability to use both sides of our brain and to think with flexibility and vision, or defensiveness and closed down thinking. And so the IQ really gives you rise to the unconscious mental patterns and views that are rooted in your lack of self-worth. And so looking at your specific gene key that you have activated in this sphere will help you start to dismantle the shadow patterns that are at work in your mind, so that you can find the way to communicate in all your relationships in a much easier and clearer way, when you can also see the higher frequencies in which you're meant to live into in this gift in the city. So when you think about your IQ, it's really important to consider that you are a multidimensional being, in that your adult self now is likely playing into mental patterns that were established when you were a younger age, i.e. 14 to 15 to about 21. And so it's really important to consider that you are surfing these subtle planes of your awareness. And so it would be interesting for you to really take into consideration the strong influences that impacted your thoughts, beliefs, opinions, mind during this age of about 14 to 21. And so because this mental wound is the last aspect to develop in regard to these 7-year cycles, it's the first step you need to tackle as you are to move any deeper in your healing process in regard to treading your golden path in the Gene Key system. I'm willing to bet that you're likely doing this work already, but having the specific language and the context of the Gene Keys to support you in this process is wildly beneficial. As you've probably experienced, as we get older, we tend to lose touch with our imagination. Our thinking can get really closed minded or closed down, and it can shrink to maybe only encompass as much as you allow it to. And so, really coming into this conversation and your contemplation with an open mind and an open heart will be wildly beneficial for you in this journey of healing these lower frequency patterns and tapping into the higher frequencies that are available to you. So as we go deeper into this IQ sphere, it's really about this blind spot in your psyche. And as you can start to recognize this pattern more showing up in your relationships and life, you can start to throw out these old unconscious belief patterns that have kept you from relating to the world in an open-hearted way. And so you can also think about this in an aspect of triggers and sparks, and like it's sparking this reaction within you because it represents a mental pattern that holds back this pressure of deep emotional pain. And again, remember this fragmentation from self-love that is literally in the cells of your body, aka genetics, aka gene keys. Hello. And this is why you can be so easily triggered by certain issues, people, or vocal tones in these relationships or experiences, because all of your cells are doing two things at all times. They are listening and responding. And then when you layer on the emotional wounds and the spiritual wounds and the deep ancestral wounds that are just compounding into this mental wound, and maybe wound is a strong word, and maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on that, but this is the process of what you're healing. And so I guess it works. I just feel kind of bad because I don't want to like only talk about that, but this is what happens. And so when you realize how these mental patterns were formed as a teenager and how they still persist in your maturity as an adult, it takes a lot of courage to take responsibility for those shadow patterns. So if you can start to travel back in your memory to that stage of your life, it will probably spark up some memories that marked those years. And when you bring your attention to specific memories, it's likely going to trigger other memories and just take you down this golden thread of recognizing this pattern and how deeply it goes back, and also potentially maybe even getting to the source of it. But that's not necessarily the point, as it is to just recognize how this has shown up for you in different ways. And as you contemplate your gene key in the sphere, it will support you in unpicking that wound and healing and raising your frequency. Duh! So as you can tell, awareness is everything. And in order to unlock the deeper currents of your emotions, you have to first unlock your mind. And the most common story that comes up about this is that you believe yourself to be unworthy of love. My baby, I've been there. I'm still there sometimes. Like, we're all there. But just know that out of this deep-seated belief that you're unworthy of love, you can develop this narrow way of thinking and behaving that only emerges when you feel emotionally threatened or uncomfortable. So it's absolutely important to look at the way that you behave when you feel stressed or under pressure, and see how your mind contracts around those emotions that lie beneath the behavior. Are you getting this? And so truly what we're doing here is teenage healing, your inner teenager. It's getting in touch with the teenager inside of you and their feelings, and recognizing that pattern that you developed when you felt overwhelmed by the power of your emotions as a teenager. And as you do this, it will open up the floodgates to a deeper process of cellular healing that will go on for as long as it needs to go on in all of its phases and stages. And just trust that once your mind has started to let go of holding back these emotions, these awarenesses, this fuller maturity, an enormous amount of energy is going to be released through your body and brain. And literal new neural pathways will start to rewire, and your continual awareness of the shadow pattern when you experience emotional discomfort will support you greatly. And so open your mind up once again to the possibility that you are worthy of love. And guess what? You will become more intelligent. You will become more mature. You will become more aware. You will become more optimistic, and drawing from those higher frequency thought forms. When you have a higher frequency and you're feeling lighter and more open and more loving, you have access to better thoughts. It's more of this open circuit thinking that you can actually tap into your true intelligence and a certainty that you are fully worthy of love. And when you live with this kind of loving and acceptance and forgiveness of yourself and others, that's when your relationships will alchemize into what you want more of and you're absolutely available of having more of in your life. So good. I just love this. It's so good. Okay, so I just want to speak into a little bit about what my gene key that I have activated here is really quickly, and then we'll wrap this episode up, I promise. Okay, so the gene key that I have activated here is gene key 40.2, and the 40th gene key is found in the will center or the heart. And that center is all about, do I have the energy for this? It's all about bargaining. It's all about desire and motivation and willpower. And the 40th gene key is the shadow of exhaustion, the gift of resolve, and the city of divine will. So already you can see how willpower and divine will are coming into the theme of this gate, this center, this gene key. This gene key is a part of the channel of community, which connects the 40th gene key to the 37th gene key in the emotional solar plexus. And so it's very much relationship oriented. It's about teamwork and roles and equal support on working towards a common goal and cultivating a tribe and community. And with this shadow of exhaustion, it's rooted in wearing too many hats, doing too many things for other people, saying yes and spreading your energy too thin, using your divine will and your divine energy inefficiently, essentially. And so reflecting back on this period of my life through the lens of this gene key, there are a couple of aspects that really stick out to me. And the first of them being that for half of this period, I was in my 13-year relationship with my ex from 17 to 21, and we got married at 21. And then for the beginning half of this phase, I was at home, still in high school, seeing my parents' relationship. And the biggest thing that sticks out to me is noticing the pattern of my parents and specifically my mother's role in the relationship, and how looking at her body and energy of my parents and different things, I can witness the exhaustion in her. And I maybe should have looked to see if she even had this gene key activated, but it doesn't really matter because this is my own perception and how it actually impacted me in experiencing exhaustion in my one-on-one relationship. Because my parents haven't had the best relationship. This is hard to talk about, but it's true. And how my mom showed up in that relationship was always something that I did not want. And it's both of my parents, tangoing in that relationship and coming together with the resources and the information that they had or didn't have to form that relationship chemistry. But what I saw from her was exhaustion of not feeling fully supported, of kind of taking care of a lot of things on her own. I'm not saying my dad didn't contribute at all, because he did, but there was not a lot of teamwork, it seemed. And I could see that my mom was exhausted. And so growing up and witnessing this, I was like, I do not want that. That's the last thing I want. And what did I do? I got into a relationship to where I tended to do the same thing. And my ex-husband was great, and he was definitely a different energy than my dad, but at the same time, there were still these aspects that were very similar. And so that showed up with my ex-husband, and I was exhausted. I was exhausted from pretending to be okay. I was exhausted from pretending to have it all figured out and to wear a smile on my face. And whenever I would reach out for support from family or other people, I didn't get the type of support that I needed reciprocated because I wasn't meant to. I needed to listen to myself, and I wasn't. And I was using my energy and my willpower to force things to move forward, to force things to work, to force our relationship to happen, to deny myself of my truth. And this steady drain on my energy lowered my vitality and my frequency, and it closed my heart off. I became so bitter and resentful towards my parents, towards my ex, towards myself, really, because relationships are your mirror. And I was cut off from my own unconditional love, that I was projecting my pain and insecurity and heartache and blame and resentment on other people because I was exhausted. My heart was exhausted. I couldn't keep it up. I was sick of it. And another aspect of this is I felt really lonely, which is actually a shadow key mark of this 40th gene key. It's that whenever you give into someone else's flow, loneliness always rears its head. And so I was giving into everyone else's flow but myself because I did not trust myself. And whenever you allow your energy to be misused by another, I'm reading from the book right now, you will feel like you are being cut off from life. And in fact, it's your own action or lack of action that has caused this state. And so that was me in a T. To AT. And this 40th shadow is actually really adept at denial. And it denies the fact that they have feelings, which is what I was doing. And this denial ultimately leads to their downfall. And if you guys have been listening, you know that I have gone completely deaf in my right ear. And I lost a baby at 5 months. And so it was eating away at me. I literally felt toxic or acidic in my body because I was unwilling or unable to face the depth of my emotional pain in this sphere, in this season of my life. And when it comes down to it, you alone are responsible for the health of yourself on all levels, just like I am. And it is you alone who must face your life and all that it brings you. And so really quickly, I want to go into the repressive nature and the reactive nature of this gene key, because I think it's really cool that if you get the Gene Keys book, you will see that there are this repressive or introverted nature and this reactive and extroverted nature associated with each shadow state. And it's really cool to dive into that. And so the introverted or repressive nature of this 40th gene key is acquiescent. It's people who lack firm boundary in life and are easily manipulated by others, lacking the will to stand up for themselves. This permissive habit is rooted in denial of one's own needs, typically arising from patterns and coping strategies that developed in childhood. I mean, come on. And so this 40th shadow drains people who do not value themselves and their energy enough. I hated myself, to be quite honest. I did not value myself. I was totally cut off from my own sense of love. I mean, it was definitely there, but I was letting other people dictate my moves before myself. And so I also really resonate with the reactive or extroverted nature of this gene key as well, which is contemptuous. This is the denial of rage. This has its roots in contempt for others, and you're really taking that denial and turning it on other people. And so I did that. I had this unconscious rage of at my parents, at my ex, at my childhood upbringing, at religion, because I grew up in this Christian community to where there was this repression of women's truth and needs and sexualities and all of this. And so I constantly isolated myself from my community because I couldn't handle this. And that was probably one of the hardest parts, was feeling super lonely. But all of this messy shadow state was really trying to lend me toward the gift of resolve, which is all about creating resolution in your relationships, in your energy, in your boundaries, and being intentional about who and what and where you give your energy to, and you just feel this sense of peace. And so it took me taking responsibility for my feelings, my emotions, my truth to come to the state of resolution to where I can actually be honest with myself and other people in my life about the truth of my heart. And in this gift of resolution that I was moving in, I was able to tap into the city of divine will, of being radically intentional about who and what and where I was giving my energy towards, and that I could see the interconnectedness of it all, and that it had brought me back home to myself. And all of the pain and all of the patterns and all of the triggers and all of the sparks had led to this culmination of me coming home to myself. And so that is the 40th gene key in a nutshell. And I just want to go over the line expression just really quickly, just so that you guys can get a further understanding of this line. Okay. And as you know, each sphere has a specific line associated with it. And the IQ sphere, line 2, for me, is all about having a brilliant mind. It's provocative in nature. This second line expression can manifest as a tendency to explode in fits of rage that don't seem matched for the issue at hand. And I wouldn't say that I had fits of rage externally, it was more internally focused. I was rageful towards myself. But the aspects that do actually really land whenever I read this second line is that it feels deeply misunderstood by others as this reaction surfaces. And so this rage was, I felt deeply misunderstood. Nobody could support me. I wasn't getting the support that I needed whenever I reached out. People were telling me just to pray about it and that I was the problem. No one straight up said that, but that was the messages that I got because I was misunderstanding myself. I wasn't allowing my truth to be okay. And I had to realize that I am the only one responsible for my feelings. No one else is. And maturing into this realization allowed me to reframe this pattern and create a new and healthy relationship with myself and with other people. And so all of the different line expressions really have to do with the mind in some capacity in this specific sphere, as you can understand why. And so I really encourage you to dive into this gene key that you have activated in the sphere. Look at what center it is activated in, because that can also tell you the energy that it is informing. And also, if you get the Gene Keys Venus Sequence book, it can go further into the different line expressions that you may have activated. Maybe you have the second line like me, but maybe you have one of the other 5 lines. And so I'm going to end this here. I hope you got a lot of benefit out of this episode. I know that it's my first one coming back after pausing on talking about this and going through the golden path for a little while, but I hope you got a lot of value out of this. I hope you would want to join me in Human Design Happy Hour or the Gene Keys Book Club moving forward, because we are going to be going deep into your shadow gifts and cities for each of your spheres and the line expressions just like this week by week together. And I'm just super excited to pour my heart and my willpower into this and to cultivate community with you. And so if you want to be a part of it, come into my DMs, message me GKBC or HDHH if you want to go ahead and drop into the Human Design Happy Hour. And regardless, I would love to hear from you. Please also share your ahas or insights or revelations that maybe you had or curiosities that you had as you dove into your gene key in this sphere. And I would just love to connect with you. So that's it for me today, my friends. Thank you so much for your time and energy. I wish you the best. As always, be brave, not perfect, and I'll catch you again soon.